Host 1. Brother ruined my wedding by proposing, so I ruined his proposal. This post is from NeitherGlove4355. I'm a 35-year-old guy, and I have a younger brother, Todd, he's 29, who had a complicated birth and had to stay in the ICU for a month. Ever since then, my parents have always doted on him, and basically denied him nothing, even if it was the expense of me or my sister, Abby, who's 32. Todd totally leans into the attention. He's made himself the center of attention at more than one special event. Mine, Abby's, or even a cousin's. Because of that, Abby and I have a pretty strained relationship with both Todd and her parents. Unfortunately, Todd ended up falling in love with a girl named Lucy. She's 24, and she announced her pregnancy at the baby shower that my mom threw for Abby. So yeah, not great. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, she's 30, I honestly wanted to elope, but she really wanted her family to be there. So, out of obligation, I invited my side of the family too. While we were out, my best man, Jim, he's 35, noticed a receipt from the jewelry store slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted him, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I straight up told Todd he was no longer going to be a groomsman because I knew he was planning to propose to Lucy at my wedding. Todd ran crying to our parents, and it all blew up. My parents were on Todd's side, saying I was unfairly judging him since he never actually admitted to planning the proposal. I brought up all Todd's past behavior, and they couldn't argue with it. Eventually, they convinced Todd to agree not to try anything at the wedding. Still, I didn't let him back into the wedding party, and I warned him that if he did pull anything as a guest, I'd make him regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and of course, Todd did exactly what I thought he would. During Michelle's father-daughter dance, her moment with her dad, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her in a way that made everyone notice. So, cue my revenge. Jim and I hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's side piece. She cornered Todd and Lucy and claimed she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied it, of course, but when she called his phone, I gave his number, by the way, and messed with his phone settings to make it all look legit. It didn't look good. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew it was me. I ignored every call and text from him or my parents until after our honeymoon. Lucy's thrown Todd's stuff out and won't let him see their kid. Todd's furious and is demanding I clear his name. I texted him back saying I had no idea what he was talking about and attached a screenshot of the wedding bill, demanding reimbursement for half. Michelle knew the whole plan. After Todd ruined her father-daughter dance, she gave me the green light. I felt pretty good about it, but now, even Abby thinks I went too far. So, am I the asshole? Nah, dog, you're a straight-up G, and your brother was being a total bitch? There is an unsung hero in this whole story, and that unsung hero is Jim. Jim was your best man, and the best man's job was to make sure that he protected the bride and groom from any danger. In this regard, my friend, your buddy Jim has chivalrously defended your honor. And by following his act with a juicy slab of revenge, I think you're totally in the right. You are not the asshole. Post 2. Sister wants to walk down the aisle at my wedding. We use that to our advantage. The next story is from Sister and My Wedding. Here I am, writing this long tale during my honeymoon. But honestly, it feels cathartic to finally type it all out. And my husband, he's more excited about sharing this story than the resort drinks. Lol. Anyway, this is a throwaway, because I don't have a Reddit account, and my husband, the Reddit fanatic, doesn't want this associated with his main. As to why he isn't the one writing it, it's because, as he says, since it's your family, you should have the honor of posting the story. But he is looking over my shoulder to help out. So, I think first I need to give some background to explain how this behavior reached this level, and why our responses were the way that they were. It's a long read. I apologize in advance. Ever since I can remember, my parents have loved my sister more. And I don't mean in subtle ways. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe her and punish me. If I accused her, even with proof, she'd get a slap in the wrist, and somehow I'd still get blamed too. My birthday cake always had to be the flavor she liked. Hers never did. And if I pointed that out, my parents acted like they had no idea that I didn't like that flavor. She always got a little more than me. We always went where she wanted, even if it was supposed to be a day about me. She grew up spoiled and honestly just used me as a punching bag. At first, she ignored me for the most part, but once we hit our teens, it got really bad. I'm not sure what came first, whether she lost all her friends and turned meaner, or if her behavior made them leave. I really never knew. My parents never told me anything bad about her, just bragged about her achievements, whereas with me, every little flaw was a joke or something to scold. Anyway, she had no friends. I did. I was decently popular, and she didn't like that. Suddenly, I went from being ignored to being her favorite target. She started accusing me of all kinds of things. Then she started accusing my friends. Eventually, my parents just flat out stopped letting me hang out with anyone. Their excuses ranged from, "They're not good people according to your sister," to, "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from total isolation was extended family. Most of us lived in the same hometown, and I was close with my cousins. At one gathering, they invited me to something, and I told them sadly that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When they asked why, my kid self, with zero filter, said it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Apparently, that got around. The adults tore into my parents. I was scolded and grounded. Shocker. But things actually improved after that. I was given a little more freedom. Eventually, my sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of the extended family knowing her social status was rock bottom got to her. My parents immediately agreed and moved her to a more expensive school, even though it cost more and was further away. She did make friends at a new school, but she never let go of her hatred for me. Maybe because I embarrassed her by telling the truth. Whatever the reason, I was now enemy number one. The bullying continued, but now her friends joined in. They came to our house and tormented me. My parents called it light teasing. I never brought friends over because my parents were awful hosts, and my sister would accuse them of stealing things, and my parents believed her. Eventually, I got my first boyfriend. Didn't want to bring him home, but of course my parents insisted. At one point, we were separated at a family event, and he came to find me, saying my sister had just flirted with him. She wore skimpy clothes, batted her eyelashes, and started talking badly about me while praising herself. He was super uncomfortable and left immediately to tell me. Naturally, my sister told a different story, that he had hit on her, and she nobly turned him down to protect me. Guess who my parents believed? Yep, not me. The relationship didn't survive. Same story with the next guy I dated. My sister flirted with him, he refused, and suddenly he was accused of being the problem. I tried pointing out a pattern, but my parents said I just had bad taste in men. Eventually, I gave up trying to date openly. I still made out with boys and had fun, but never brought anyone home. Got so bad I was called names in high school. Not for what I did, but for refusing to date. My sister never heard about it, thankfully. I can only imagine how she'd have used that. Meanwhile, she brought one boyfriend home, and my parents rolled out the red carpet. They kept telling me how great he was and why couldn't I find someone like him. Then one day he was gone, and he was suddenly a horrible man who tricked her. Throughout this time, she got more money, better curfews, more freedom. Every excuse they made for her, they later contradicted when it was my turn. If I said anything, I was scolded or gaslit. Eventually, it was time for her to graduate. She got into a college, not a great one, with no scholarship. My parents were so proud and promised to pay for everything. I was happy she'd be away, even if it didn't really improve my life. And then came my own graduation. My mom sat me down and told me they had no money for my college. Since they were paying for hers, I should get a job, wait until she was done, and maybe then they'd consider helping me. Oh, and if I stayed home, I'd have to pay rent and part of the bills. I mentioned student loans. She said that they would decide what school was worth going into debt for. They didn't even know my grades, but I didn't fight them. Why? Because I expected this. I'd spent years preparing. I studied hard, got good grades, and kept my head down. I knew they'd find an excuse not to help me. I knew college was my only chance to escape, and I worked for it. When the time came, I got a full scholarship. Not Ivy League, but a good college. I posted the news on social media with a nice polite thank you to my parents, even though they had nothing to do with it. They were a little proud at first. Then I think my sister found out and flipped. Suddenly, my parents were suggesting I not go, that my sister was struggling in college, and I'd probably do worse. I stuck to my guns. College saved me. I still visited occasionally, but never introduced any man to them. I didn't trust them. My sister dropped out, moved back in, and got a job at my mom's company. All thanks to nepotism. She didn't pay rent, of course. It's different, my parents said. Fast forward, I met my now husband. He's the exact opposite of me. Where I used to freeze up in conflict, he thrives in it. He stands up for himself and for me. He lives for drama, especially when it involves revenge on awful people. When we started talking about marriage, we didn't care much about a big ceremony. We'd rather put money toward our dream honeymoon in Europe. But since most of my family was nearby, we decided to have a small ceremony in my hometown. We sent out announcements and saved the date. Then, of course, my parents demanded to meet him. I wanted to say no, but I was weak. My husband was thrilled. He brought a hidden recorder and said, "If your sister flirts with me, I'm catching it all in 4K. But what they said wasn't flirting. It was even worse. They told him, seriously, that they'd pay for our wedding if my sister could walk down the aisle first in a wedding dress at my wedding. Their logic? It's not fair for the younger sister to marry first. My husband was stunned, but he played it cool. Said he'd think about it and talk to me. Then he came home, grinning like the Grinch. We plotted. We considered a fake-out venue, or letting her walk down and doing something wild at the reception. Eventually, we landed on something clean, simple, and legal. We'd let them believe we agreed. We'd let them spend money, but on the big day, we'd have security turn her away at the door. And that's exactly what we did. Over the next few months, my husband pretended to be on board. He made sure nothing was written down. Everything was in person or over the phone. He pretended I was controlling and paranoid, that I checked his phone and emails and couldn't be trusted, so nothing could be texted. And my parents, being idiots, went along with it. They paid for the most expensive options: photographer, flowers, food, everything, because my husband pretended we settled for cheaper things. And my sister would throw a fit. Then they'd generously upgrade it for her. They even wanted me to wear an ugly dress. But that got texted, so I refused in writing. We couldn't risk them saying I agreed. My husband visited them regularly to update them and coordinate the secret plan. He even brought scraps of fabric from the seamstress and said he'd ruined my dress. He told them I was raging and he needed to calm me down. We made sure all communication from then on came through me, reinforcing the idea I was watching his phone. Every time my sister tried to flirt, he acted awkward, like he might cave, but he never did. And he kept insisting that no one ever text about it. Then, the big day arrived. They had a whole plan. They'd have my sister walk down the aisle first, just before me at the start of the ceremony. I'd be too shocked to stop her. I'd be grateful they paid and too embarrassed to cause a scene. Except, we had security. My dad stood at the entrance like he was waiting for me. My sister was supposed to arrive and walk first, but the second she showed up in a wedding dress, she was blocked. The security guard, who we tipped very well, said, "Sorry, this event already has a bride." My dad and sister lost it. She threw a fit. My dad threatened to call the cops. The friend we planted came out yelling and crying, asking what was going on, making a huge scene. The whole thing blew up. And me? I walked down the aisle with my husband's dad, who ran over to stand in when mine bailed on me to go fix the sister situation. I was teary, partly acting, partly real. I'd hoped it wasn't this bad, that he wouldn't actually walk out on me, but he did. The ceremony went on without them. We smiled, we laughed, we married. And outside, my parents and sister were getting ripped to shreds by guests who heard what happened. Eventually, they were forced to leave. They later tried to say my husband was in on it, that he tricked them, but he had the ultimate defense: zero proof. Everything was verbal. There were no texts, no emails, no receipts. He played dumb, acted confused, denied everything. They had no leg to stand on. My sister lost her mind. She sat on the ground screaming and crying. My dad looked like he wanted to punch someone, but nobody believed them, and everyone who saw the drama turned on them. After the wedding, they kept calling and texting me. My husband took screenshots and sent them all to our extended family group chat, exposing them, showing the harassment. He even added a snarky message begging the family to help stop them from ruining our honeymoon too, now that they've already failed to ruin the wedding. The best part? He joked that we didn't want them showing up at our hotel, and then claiming he had secretly agreed to pretend to hook up with my sister in the honeymoon suit. Lol. Since then, silence. Sweet, blessed silence. And best of all, after a lifetime of them ruining everything for me, they failed. I got married, I got my happy day, and we got a full, beautiful wedding, paid for by the people who hated me most. Karma's real, and sometimes she shows up in a wedding dress, just not the one you expected. Well, that one was quite something. I gotta say, I expected it to be a lot more elaborate given the setup. I actually liked the wrong venue idea. Sounded a lot goofier in my opinion. But hey, you've had enough moments taken away from you. Don't let me detract from your moment of revenge. Post 3. Cheat on your wife with mine? I will burn your life to the ground. This next post is from broad_ads. Back in the early 2000s, I started to get this gut feeling that something was off with my wife. We had 2 young kids at the time, around 4 and 6, still small but old enough to talk about what they did during the day. They started mentioning that they were spending a lot of time with my wife's parents. That alone wasn't suspicious, except her parents lived about 90 minutes away, and apparently the kids were over there 2 or 3 times a week, which just happened to be the exact days my wife wasn't working her part-time job. I asked her about it and she denied it, but honestly, she's been a terrible liar, so I started checking the mileage in her car. Sure enough, she was clocking an extra 400 miles a week. Something was definitely going on. Then one day, I sat down at a computer and saw she'd left a sticky note by the keyboard. Her AOL password was written on it. I couldn't resist. I logged in, opened her email, and saw messages between her and her college best friend talking about how she was regularly hooking up with an ex-boyfriend from high school. Not only that, they were mocking the guy's wife, calling her names, saying she let herself go after having kids. Yeah, real classy stuff. I printed those emails, stashed them, and got to work. I contacted a friend of mine who was a cop, and he connected me with a private investigator named Ron. I gave Ron the emails and a basic timeline, and he found everything. Photos, dates, times, locations, my wife's routine, drop the kids at their parents' house, meet the guy for lunch, and then head to a cheap motel for a few hours before picking the kids up and coming home like nothing happened. I was furious, but also focused. I hired a divorce lawyer. I wasn't going to let this blow up in my kids' lives the way my own parents' cheating blew up mine. I kept everything civil, but I was done. I also asked Ron to dig into the guy she was seeing. Bob. Ron, being a pro, delivered. Bob was married, had 3 kids of his own, and worked as a VP of sales at a business owned by, wait for it, his father-in-law. So I came up with a plan. On the same day my wife was served divorce papers at her job, Ron met with Bob's wife and showed her the report. Every detail, every photo. I figured she deserved to know. I didn't expect what came next, but I wasn't surprised either. Bob's wife cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. When her dad had found out what Bob had done, he fired him from the company, and since her parents owned the house they were living in, Bob also got evicted. From there, things spiraled. Court battles, police reports, even an incident where Bob got into it with her brother and ended up with a broken nose. There were restraining orders, criminal charges, jail time. I can't find Bob online anymore. Last I heard, he moved out of state. His ex-wife, on the other hand, took over her dad's company after he retired. Good for her. As for me, my ex and I kept things strictly about the kids. Now that they're adults, we don't talk at all. I don't hate her, but I don't care about her life beyond the fact that she's their mom. That's all she is to me now. Damn, man, that's tough. There isn't really much to say about it. I'll give you kudos for trying to keep things at least civil, just so your kids don't grow up and not have their families' lives ruined by a crappy mom. I hope you're doing fine, man. I hate to be in your situation. Post 4. My ex MIL sent her church friends to harass my daughters and me, so I exposed her lies, and now she's being shunned by her entire church. The next post is from ScaredyCat1122. I'm a 46-year-old woman, and I have 2 daughters, 17 and 15. Their relationship with their late father's parents, my ex-in-laws, has always been strained, and it's only gotten worse since my ex-husband passed away in an accident last year. Why? Well, turns out he'd been cheating on me. He fathered 2 sons with his affair partner, and after both of them died, things got messy. My in-laws tried to get custody of my daughters and tried to move in with us. We're going to court over the custody issue. As for moving in, absolutely not. That will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend farmer's market with produce, meats, and sweets. This weekend was extra special because it was my youngest daughter's birthday. Since her party's later in the month, I gave her a budget and let her loose at the market to pick out whatever she wanted, mostly candy and chocolate. About an hour in, I got worried. Then she called me, crying. She was cornered by a group of older women, all berating her for being unchristian because she refused to spend time with her paternal grandparents and because she didn't want to be a good big sister to her poor orphan baby brothers. To be clear, my daughters are the ones who found out about their dad's affair and his secret kids. That's trauma, and they've been working through it with therapy. So I ran over with my oldest, I got between the women and my daughter, and told my eldest to go pay and wait in the car. Then, I turned to face the women. Some of them I recognized from my ex-in-law's church. They started shouting at me, saying I was worse than my daughter for refusing to obey my in-laws like a good Christian wife. Yeah, I nearly laughed. Eventually, the commotion got so loud that we were all asked to leave the market. Those women followed us back to the car like a pack of vultures, but we got in and drove off. The night after the girls went to bed, I reached out to a guy I know from their church, someone I still have a decent relationship with. He apologized and told me what was going on. Turns out, my ex-mother-in-law had posted this dramatic sob story in the church's Facebook group, claiming my daughters and I were horrible people, that we had abandoned her and her husband, that we were leaving them penniless and homeless. She claimed my daughters refused to speak to them, and that we were the reason why she lost custody of her grandsons. Of course, she left out the part where those boys were the result of her son cheating on me. Instead, she told the church that the woman he had an affair with was actually our surrogate, and that I rejected the babies because they were boys. Disgusting. Here's the thing though, this church is very judgmental about certain things, but one thing they're absolutely not okay with is cheating. Doesn't matter if it's the husband or the wife, infidelity is a huge deal to them. So I decided to give them the full truth. Because I was in the middle of divorcing my ex when he died, I had tons of evidence, and since the divorce wasn't finalized, I wasn't legally restricted from sharing it. I took the next day off, went to a print shop, and got high-quality prints of everything. Photos of my ex and his affair partner, text messages between them, messages between his parents and him, where they clearly support his affair, emails and texts where my in-laws harassed and insulted my daughters. One of the worst, a message from just 2 days after my ex died, where they called my daughters illegitimate and said it was their fault he died because they had exposed his cheating and I had filed for divorce. I compiled everything into neat little binders, styled like the church's own hymn packets. The first page, a full-color photo of my ex making out with his affair partner in our living room. Underneath, I wrote ex-husband's name and affair partner's name. A love story. I dropped the binders off at the church right before Sunday service. There's a table in the back where people grab songbooks and no one checks them. Let's just say the gossip train took off at full speed. People were furious. The comments were being thrown around on the church Facebook page were brutal. The pastor had to step in just to keep things from getting R-rated. Some people still blamed me for the divorce, but they also said they understood why I strayed from my duties given the betrayal, unlike my ex and his Jezebel. And that's the church-appropriate version of what they called her. My daughters got apology letters. I got an invitation to return to church for support, and my ex-in-laws? They were shamed into leaving the church. My ex Emile posted on her personal page about how alienated she felt, how no one cares about the elderly anymore, and how she wished her great son was still alive to take care of them. With what money? I have no idea. I was the breadwinner in that marriage. Oh, and about the inheritance. My ex had a will naming his parents as the beneficiaries. He told me he'd named our daughters instead, but I guess that was just another lie. I never asked for anything for myself. My own will leaves everything to my girls. So no, I'm not leaving them penniless. They got exactly what he intended, and now they're living in the consequences of backing a man who lied, cheated, and left everyone around him worse off. But the truth, that's mine, and I'm sure everyone knew it. My dear, you have righteous indignation by your side. You know that God's with you when the lie so stupid gets blasted so bad and so easily. The affair was a surrogate? Are you freaking kidding me? That's how many loops of Hollywood framing. Amateur storytelling, not even straight to DVD level. It's also kind of funny how these old crones go around doting her and her daughter. It's like, almost like a Greek tragedian wrote the story. I hope life's been better after. It's morbid to say, but your ex-husband being out of the picture makes things a tad bit easier. Post 5. Threaten my friends with revenge pics? I'll ruin your whole life in under an hour. The next post is from Further Dimensions. So here's the deal. My friend made a mistake. Not the end of the world kind, but one that unfortunately a lot of people have made. She sent some private photos to someone she thought she could trust. They'd been talking online. She didn't know much about him, just his first name, his screen name, and a general idea of where he lived and worked. He wasn't even in our country, but he said he'd be traveling nearby for work soon, and they talked about meeting up. But then, red flags started popping up, so she backed out. And that's when it happened. The guy threatened to post her private photos online. Full-on revenge nonsense. He thought he had all the power. But what he didn't know is that I'm an attorney. So, I got to work. First, I gathered every picture he had ever sent her, anything that might help ID him. One of them had him wearing a polo shirt with a company logo on it, Goldmine. His screen name led me to a TikTok page which linked to his Instagram. That gave me his real name. From there, I found his LinkedIn, and yep, the workplace matched a logo on his shirt. A little more digging gave me the emails for the CEO, VP of HR, Operations Manager, and Public Relations at his company. So, I wrote them a lovely little message on behalf of my client and attached screenshots of everything. His messages threatening to leak explicit content, the photos that matched his face to his company's shirt, proof of how I tracked his identity, a shot of his motorcycle with a license plate clearly visible, screenshots of him talking about a workplace incident with timestamps, messages where he bragged about hooking up with an ex at work and about wanting to do the same with my friend in his office. Oh, and I wasn't done. He also sent her a picture of his work laptop showing his full Outlook calendar and what looked like proprietary company info, supposedly to prove he was busy. So I included that too, along with the pictures he took inside the workplace, with employees in the background who clearly hadn't consented to being photographed. In the email, I also let his company know that I'd been forwarding all this to their local law enforcement, since he had told my friend he'd been traveling to the US soon. I also informed them that I'd be submitting everything to the FBI, because threats like this made towards a US citizen on US soil constitute a federal offense. And yes, I'm serious. One of the assistant U.S. attorneys in my district is an old law school buddy. So, if his company moves forward with bringing him to the States for work, I will absolutely make sure that federal law enforcement is waiting for him at customs. And since I now had his license plate number, I know exactly where he lives. And I plan to contact his local police department the very next morning. To the guy who thought hiding behind a screen name made him untouchable, it took me about 45 minutes to blow up your entire life. Don't mess with my friends. Well, there's a really good lesson to learn here, fellas. It really helps to have friends in high places, which is why it pays to socialize, and to be real nice while socializing so people like you more. Oh, and don't threaten to do trashy shit like posting people's private photos around, especially when your digital footprint is a Google search away. Post 6. When I wrote my dad's obituary, I left out my mom and exposed her years of abuse and neglect. The next story is from strugglebus_RN. My dad passed away on December 1st, 2022. He'd been chronically ill for over 15 years, and near the end, he briefly lived with me. I made sure his final days were peaceful and full of love. But there's another part to the story. My mom. As my dad's health declined, he became more and more reliant on her, and she took full advantage of that. She wasn't a great person to begin with, but what she did to him during those years was straight up neglectful and exploitative. She constantly told people they were separated or divorced, even though they weren't. She was flirting and chatting with random men online, claiming she was going to move away and marry someone else. Financially, she drained him. She manipulated, controlled, and mistreated him in every way. We tried every legal route we could, tried to get her kicked out, arrested, something. But every time, we were told it was a civil matter and nothing could be done. Eventually, my dad made me his durable power of attorney and added me to all his accounts. But even then, he still didn't want to leave the home he worked so hard to pay off, even with all the pain she caused him. I begged him for years to come live with me. When the time finally came, I brought him home on hospice the day after Thanksgiving and did everything I could to give him peace. After he passed, I met with a funeral home to carry out his final wishes. That's when I was told I'd need her consent to have him cremated. Of course, she said no at first. It wasn't until I allowed her to keep the Social Security survivor benefits, which would have been hers anyway, that she finally gave in. And that's when I decided she was going to be erased from his legacy. I wrote his obituary myself. I left out every single mention of her. There was no loving wife, no survived by spouse, nothing. It read like she never existed, because as far as I'm concerned, she doesn't deserve a spot in his story. She lost her mind when it was published. Friends and family started asking questions. What's her name? Why wasn't she mentioned? And I told them the truth. I've been in therapy for years, trying to heal from the narcissistic abuse I endured growing up. And I believe this. If she didn't want me to talk about the things she did, she shouldn't have done them. So I told people everything. The emotional abuse, the lies, the manipulation, how she treated my dad during his worst years, and how she tried to play the grieving widow when she was anything but. I completely ruined the public image she spent decades crafting. That little poor me persona, gone. Do I sound like a villain? Maybe, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. She earned every bit of silence she got. Man, in a way, this was the best way to serve the justice your father deserved, without ruining the last moments that everybody had with him. Pretending she never existed in an obituary is a lot more classy than taking the initiative to blow her out publicly. Even though you did do it eventually, it was out of a request from the people who had to know. It was good that this was done outside of the wake, funeral, or obituary, etc. Good job keeping his last moments sacred, his reputation intact, and giving him his much-needed retribution from the vilest woman on the planet.